Welcome back, wanderer of ancient dreams. You've survived the filth, the politics, and the midnight torchlight. You've dined with emperors, eavesdropped on gossip, and watched the city breathe in and out like a tired old beast. But tonight, we drift into something heavier. The quiet, gilded rot beneath Rome's perfection. Because when luxury ruled every hour, the Romans learned an old truth. Too much of everything eventually becomes nothing. So, breathe slow. The marble floors are cold, the candles are low, and the empire is starting to crumble, softly, beautifully from the inside. Let's begin with a man who knew excess intimately. Lucius Licinius Crassus, one of the richest men in Roman history. This is a man who literally owned fire brigades, not for charity, but profit. When a building caught fire, he'd arrive with his men, offer to buy the property on the spot for a bargain, and only then, once ownership changed hands, order his crew to put out the flames. That's Roman capitalism in its rawest, sleepiest form. Clever, cold, and it worked. He built fortunes on other people's misfortunes, which is very Roman when you think about it. And though he slept in marble halls, wealth didn't make him happy. He died chasing glory, facing Parthian archers in the desert. Not exactly the restful ending you'd imagine for a man who once owned half of Rome. Now, float over to another household, the world of Seneca, philosopher, tutor to Nero, and a man who could talk endlessly about virtue while bathing in silver. He preached simplicity, but owned sprawling villas and slaves enough to staff a small amphitheater. He wrote about peace of mind while plotting survival under a tyrant who burned cities for inspiration. A contradiction? Certainly, but also very human. The elites of Rome lived in a tension between ideals and appetites, and the louder they spoke about moderation, the more they indulged behind closed doors. And speaking of indulgence, few names glimmer as faintly grotesque as Vitellius, an emperor for less than a year, but oh, what a year it was. Vitellius turned gluttony into an art form. His dinners were legendary, feasts that lasted for days, dishes that mixed oysters, peacock brains, and flamingo tongues. He had special cooks for every region of the empire, and at some point, his body just gave up. Too much wine, too much meat, too little moderation. Imagine falling asleep, surrounded by golden plates, and realizing none of it fills the quiet inside. Rome's luxury was like that, a lullaby of emptiness wrapped in silk. Let's glide now through a domus, a Roman mansion at twilight. Marble floors gleam with lamplight. Slaves whisper as they pour honeyed wine. A senator's wife adjusts her hair. 50 pins of gold and ivory, each worth more than a farmer's year of wages. The air smells of roses and smoke. Everything shines, but nothing feels alive. We tend to imagine ancient luxury as beautiful, and it was, but it was also fragile. A single bad rumor could end a family. A careless phrase might turn a feast into a funeral, because in Rome, beauty and fear always dined together. Even the architecture had this irony. Temples were built for gods who were half forgotten by the people praying in them. Statues of emperors stood taller than real men, but hollow inside, literally and metaphorically. And the baths, those steamy sanctuaries of social life, were decorated with mosaics of dolphins and nymphs, hiding the grime and sweat of thousands. Luxury was both armor and illusion. Let's drift now toward the quieter corners. the private rooms of the truly powerful. Here, amid silk curtains and imported perfumes, lies the anxiety of emperors. Imagine Commodus, son of Marcus Aurelius, a man who inherited philosophy and traded it for vanity. He loved dressing as Hercules, carrying a club, posing for statues that showed him half god, half glorious narcissist. He fought in the Colosseum, not as a warrior, but as entertainment. The crowd applauded. The senators smiled. Everyone pretended this was fine. It wasn't. Rome was losing its mind in velvet slow motion. The real tragedy of Rome's elite wasn't cruelty or madness. It was boredom. When you own everything, nothing surprises you. They built villas just to have somewhere new to sleep. They filled gardens with exotic birds because silence was unbearable. They imported snow from the Alps to chill their wine because apparently room temperature wasn't imperial enough. It's funny, in a quiet sort of way, how empires always end up here. Comfort so extreme, it starts to ache. Pleasure so constant, it becomes pain. And the elites of Rome, wrapped in gold, drifted into that ache willingly. Meanwhile, outside those marble walls, the commoners slept soundly on straw mats. No feasts, no statues, no worries about poisoned figs. Sometimes the poorest Romans lived longer than their masters, not because life was kind, but because it was simpler. There's something humbling about that. In the end, luxury doesn't save you from mortality. It just gives you better pillows to think about it on. By the late Empire, decadence had turned hollow. Banquets grew dull, senators faked interest in poetry, and philosophers quietly packed for retirement. Even Rome's art, once vibrant and alive, began repeating itself like a tired song. The empire wasn't conquered by force alone. It was lulled to sleep by its own comfort. And maybe that's the most fitting end. Not a dramatic fall, but a long, luxurious nap from which no one ever really woke up. So tonight, as you lie there, think of Rome's gilded halls, its endless feasts, its sleepless emperors. Remember that even the greatest civilization can drown in its own silk. And maybe, just maybe, your blanket and quiet room are a kind of victory. Sleep well, traveler. You've wandered through the empire of excess and lived to tell the tale.